Hello everyone, my name's Butch and I like to make ball jointed figures. If you're wondering how I begin my process, it starts with the beads and the joints. First, I make a drawing and I'll put a circle where each of the joints are going to be. I'll use a geometric shape for a body part. If there's going to be two beads in a joint, I'll draw it with two beads on my little drawing. This way I can count out how many of a certain size of bead and even which color. I'll write a list of how many of a small, how many of a medium and a flesh, so that when I'm making them, I can keep track. You can lose track real quick. This is actually a little sheet that I've been writing down all the numbers for my current build that's just about finished. I keep track of all the times. Now I've made a jig to cast my beads with. You can hand roll them and drill them out after. This jig actually saves a lot of time. A standard doll, you'll build 20 beads just for one doll. That's a lot of beads to roll out and find the center of and hand drill out. So I find this method speed things along. What used to take me a day and a half to build, I can now make in 4 hours. I don't cast many parts for my dolls, but the joints for the beads, I really can't beat the time saver it is. I've recently developed a mold for making a new neck bead, so maybe I'll have to do a mold making video for that. I just make sure the putty is real soft when it goes in, super warm, and I make it egg shaped, and I squish it down just a little bit so it sits in the mold when I open it up, and then I push my bar through and I finish squeezing down on the mold, and it just increases that flashing a little more. These are the beads I used. They're just some nylon beads with some 2-part epoxy paste. You could use the putty just to join them together for a knee or elbow joint that I don't have to assemble or put together. The real handy thing about making my beads this way is if when you're done making all the beads and you find out some aren't the right size or maybe not the right color, it's easy to match up the size and color that you need. For this video, because I'm going to use it to make a doll as I go along, I actually ended up going back through and having to make all the big ones one size smaller. And because I'll be using the parts for a different video, I had to make 6 of those bigger ones. Here I'm going to show you like the flashing. I just trim it off with some scissors. Comes off pretty easy. In the beginning, I used to leave the top of the flashing off, but I'd only trim up the inside part. That way, when I was making an elbow or a knee, I could make sure the top and the bottom one, when I joined them, would be in line with each other. Now this here, I'm making a new neck bead. It's one I've kind of stumbled across. I used to fill them in completely. But I started going with a barbell shape. And if you cut the insides flat, they can kind of squish together real good. And oh, what a maneuverable neck it's given me. That's the one I'm going to be making a mold of. Now when I trim them up, usually the flashing's thin enough after you trim it with the scissors. If you scrape just the edge of the knife backwards against it, it smoothens things pretty good actually. Like I said, this doll's going to take 20 beads. So there's a lot of trimming and there's 2 hours of just trimming. Once you're all done trimming and smoothing out the edges, putting the beads together if you're making an elbow or a knee, by the time you're all done, it's a 4-hour chore. But once you have the knees and the elbows and all the beads for your wrists and your necks and your waists and your hips all made, then the building process really zooms along. This is that neck bead. I'm just flattening out 2 inside edges. It shrinks the neck bead a little bit and leaves these 2 close together dumbbells. And when it goes to pivot around in the neck socket, it's going to give me a beautiful range of motion. And with this figure, I'm not putting a peg for the neck, so I'll get both the upper and lower action on this head. Here's the ones I'm going to do. I use Bacon Bond all the time. Anytime I'm putting 2 pieces together, fresh on fresh, fresh on old, fresh on baked, it doesn't matter. I'm putting Bacon Bond on any surface. I'll usually let it tack up just a little bit. I find if you use it while it's gooey, it will make whatever you're sticking to it slide, which that's not a bad thing if you're using it like a glue and just dropping it in place. But here I'm just making sure that I get that inside smooth. I actually do very little sanding with how I create my figures too. I make all this at my kitchen table, so I really don't like to make a whole lot of mess. I don't mind trimming a little bit. It sweeps up nicely. The dust, I don't like breathing it. Here we're making an elbow. This time I'm just using 2 round beads together. I'm going to put a little bit of polymer clay between them. And that way when I squish them together, I know there's going to be good contact in there. I leave a little nub at the back. I won't let it go past halfway either equator of the bead. It'll act almost as a stop when I build the upper and lower arms. I like to make sure I get everything as smooth as I possibly can. It just makes it so that I don't have to do any carving or sanding after the fact. Now when it comes to the translucents, all the polymer clay I use, I only ever buy Sculpey. I get the translucent 3 and I mix it 50-50 with the Sculpey translucent Primo. The 3 has a nice smooth soft texture to it, and the Primo it strengthens it up. But if I just try to use just the straight Primo, I don't find it has the sculptability the 3 does. The 2 takes a little work to meld together, but when you do, it works beautifully and the strength is phenomenal. I do sculpt in a lot of color. I like it because it almost acts like a primer for when I do paint. I've just started painting figures, but I really do like having it already primed to the color I like underneath, which is funny for a guy that sees in black and white. This is a knee that I'm making for the character I'm going to use to show all the different aspects of how I build a doll. Because the boot's going to be in black and red, I wanted the knee to have both the black and the red in it, and using the red to join it into the kneecap will give me that illusion of a strap without ever having to put a strap. Now I make a waist 4 different ways. This is among my favorite and has some of the best mobility and aesthetics. I'll be making another video after this one on the different waists and how I build them, with an example of each of the waists. And with that, all the beads that we're going to need to build a doll have been formed, made. Now it's just time to stick them all in the oven. I leave everything on the bars as I'm forming it. All my bars are the same thickness, so all the parts are interchangeable after I'm done baking. Well, here's our bunch of beads. This is pretty much everything except for I actually have a skull bead that I cast for doing the head, but I'll be covering that later. And now's a great time to actually start talking about some of the special beads that I build for them. These include some of them like the neck beads. This is one that I made that it's a double bead. but instead of being a barbell shaped, it's more like just a bean. The sides fully filled in and smooth. Sometimes I do like using a bead like this. It was my go-to for a neck bead for a while. Here you can see that filler that went around the inside. I just made one by accident and forgot to fill it and tried it out and it worked great, so I'm kind of switching over to it. The peg on the top is something I use for interchanging heads. You only get to use the bottom movement, but being able to pull the head off and on has some advantages sometimes. The loop that hangs down below it, that's where I feed the string through for the legs. This is that elbow knee bead that comes in that mold that I made. It's actually pretty good. Both ends are really round. There's just no kneecap on it. It's easy to add afterwards. It's also easy to add a knee pad, or if I want, I can even use it as a neck bead, so it only looks down or back really good. Excellent for making riders. This is a bead that I'm going to demonstrate how to make a peg bead. A peg bead will have a black collar. It's actually a stir stick. I bought a package of 2,000 of them for like $4 on Amazon. But with that peg coming out of the bead, I can let it go down into the thigh or into the upper arm to control the leg and arm movement better. It makes the socket there feel really secure. Here I'm going to show you, I just took that pre-made mold elbow bead, knee bead, depending on the size of the doll you're going to make. And sorry, I only had the red Sharpie that was working. Most times I do it in pencil anyways. I'm going to drill out some pilot holes so that I can keep my line straight. I like doing these on the bar because, well, the bar gives you a straight line through. It makes it easier for lining things up. Most of my construction's all done on these bars. They're actually a tattoo bar for needles. They're blank. I bought a package of 50 of them offline. I just cut the eyelets off the other end. Now I do use a hand drill when I drill out most of my bead holes. The holes are small, so the drill bits go through pretty easy. I find it makes less mess, and I get more control over the pitch and squareness of the hole I'm drilling. I'm only drilling tiny ones anyways. I use it to connect from the end one to the opening, and it just helps it when I go to cut out and clear the channel so that there's a space for the elastic to move. I have a couple of these hand drills. I got 2 of the black ones and 1 of the silver. I wasn't entirely impressed with the silver one. It was the first one I bought, but because I do everything on a bar, I can load a bar in it like I would a drill bit, and I use it as a handle for holding my pieces. I can let the bar go up or down. I can adjust it, which I kind of like. Here I'm just cutting the channels, just connecting those holes that I drilled in, smoothing it out. And I know when I've cleared out enough, when that bar can move smoothly through the slot that I've carved into the bead. I'll also use it for clearing debris. The little gray thing you see on the end of my knife there, that's actually one of them little cut resistant thumb protectors. Oh, they work handy. So it's easy to figure out that once you cut a slot for each bead, for each joint, and some requiring 2, you're cutting 8 to 10 of these slots. And that's before you do anything special with a doll, like put tails or wings on them. Just the ones I'm going to need for doing my doll is going to take about 2 hours to cut them all. Now the reason I didn't use the beads to show you these techniques and the beads I was going to make is until I actually start making the body and get legs, calves, upper arms, forearms all made, I can't have any of the slots cut in these beads. They need to stay perfectly round like they are. That's why I pulled some extra beads out of my bag of extras to show and demonstrate. Never throw away that old stuff, that extra stuff, that's beads that are too big, too small. Be surprised when they'll come in handy for a test. Here I'm just drilling out and cutting a slot like I did for the knee pink bead that I did. Drilling some holes and then just connecting the holes afterwards, slowly trimming it away. I never try to force a cut. You're better off just to cut little bits at a time. Take your time. Because I find as soon as you start horsing on this stuff, it just cracks. It breaks. It's just the nature of clay. With this bead here though, after I'm done cutting the channel, I'm going to end up drilling it out to accommodate that peg, which is actually just a stir stick. It's not really a peg, but it's hollow. When I was first making my ball joint dolls, I actually put these stir sticks from one peg ball joint to another peg ball joint so that the stir stick actually rode inside the channel I was carving. But with a little experimentation, I found out if the chasm is just thick enough for the elastic, it keeps the joints pretty stable. And if you didn't want to use polymer beads or didn't want to make them, you can easily substitute them for wooden beads. Just when you go to attach them, like when you're making your elbows, just make sure you use a little bit of the bacon bond, the adhesive for it. And they'll stick together really good. And then just carve out your channels like I did here. Now when I drill the hole to get to that size, I change up drill bit after drill bit after drill bit like you saw. And yeah, I don't try to jump. I'll start with a tiny little hole and I'll just keep slowly expanding it with the drill bits. Doing it this way, I can drill out some pretty good sized holes for some tiny beads just by slowly increasing the size diameter of the drill bit and stepping it up between each one. But with that hip bead made, it gives you total control over the leg when you're posing. And here we go. That is all the beads you need. And with that, here's my next doll that I have coming up. You can see where we've used the same beads in the knees, in the hips, and into the arms, and the wrists, and into the torso. The next video is going to cover the torso and the 4 different types of them that I make. So I hope you come back and check it out.